You already have a number in your head. The salary that would finally make the tight feeling in your chest let go. Maybe it's $20,000 more than you make right now. Maybe it's 10 times that. Here's the strange part. Researchers spent 15 years fighting over what that number actually is. Two different Nobel-winning teams landed on two different answers, and in a rare moment of scientific honesty, they finally sat down together and agreed on one. The number is lower than the life you're probably chasing right now, and for a specific group of people, crossing it barely helps at all. Once you understand why, you will look at your own paycheck differently. Let's get into it. For most of the last decade and a half, if you brought up money and happiness at a dinner table, someone would eventually say $75,000. That figure got repeated so many times, it turned into folk wisdom, the kind of thing people said with total confidence, without knowing where it came from. It came from one Princeton study published in 2010, and for years it was treated like settled science. Then, another researcher ran the numbers with sharper tools and found something completely different. Two studies, two respected research teams, two opposite conclusions. And in 2023, something rare happened. Instead of arguing past each other for another decade, the two sides sat down and combined their data. What they found changes how you should think about your own paycheck, whether you make $40,000 a year or $400,000. Start back in 2010. Two Princeton researchers, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, both Nobel laureates, pulled apart a mountain of Gallup survey data covering hundreds of thousands of Americans. They weren't just asking whether money helps. They split happiness into two separate things, and that split matters more than almost anything else in this story. The first is your emotional well-being, your actual mood on an ordinary Tuesday. Are you laughing? Are you relaxed? Or are you snapping at people because you're stressed and worn down? The second is your life evaluation, the score you'd give your entire life if you stepped back and rated the whole shape of it. One is how you feel while you're living your day. The other is how you feel when you judge it from a distance, and almost every argument about money and happiness is really an argument about which of those two things a person means. Kahneman and Deaton found that life evaluation kept climbing as income rose, no ceiling in sight, more money, more satisfaction, all the way up. But day-to-day emotional well-being told a different story. It rose too, right up until about $75,000 a year, and then, according to their data, it leveled off. Past that point, an extra raise barely moved how people actually felt on a normal day. That number, 75,000, became a kind of permission slip. People used it to tell themselves the chase was basically over, that wanting more past that line was just greed talking. The problem is that the tidy version was never the whole truth. About a decade later, a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania named Matthew Killingsworth decided to test that ceiling with sharper tools of his own. The original study had asked people to remember how they felt, and memory bends the truth more than we like to admit. Killingsworth wanted to catch people in the moment instead, so he built a smartphone app that pinged more than 33,000 people at random points during their ordinary days and asked one simple question: how do you feel right now? He gathered more than 1,700,000 of these live readings, real moods captured mid-commute, mid-meeting, mid-dinner, not filtered through the fog of memory. When he lined all of it up against income, the famous plateau was gone. Happiness kept rising steadily with income, well past $75,000, with no sign of stopping anywhere he looked. Now there were two teams, two respected studies, and two answers that flatly contradicted each other. Here's where it gets interesting. Instead of another decade of academics sniping at each other from opposite ends of a journal, Kahneman and Killingsworth did something rare. They teamed up, on purpose, in what researchers call an adversarial collaboration, and brought in a third researcher, Barbara Mellers, to act as a neutral referee. Two people who fully expected to disagree, working the same data together, hunting for the truth instead of the win. Published in 2023, here's what they found. Both sides had been right the whole time. They had simply been describing different people. Part of the confusion came down to a measurement problem. The original study had asked a blunt yes or no question, "Were you happy yesterday?" with no room in between mildly content and genuinely thrilled. The increases in happiness at higher incomes were real, the survey was just too coarse to see them clearly. Once the team used a finer measure, the picture sharpened into two groups. For most people, and even more so for the happiest third of the group, well-being keeps climbing well past $100,000. And for the happiest people, it actually speeds up. But there was a second group hiding in that same data. The least happy slice of people, roughly the bottom fifth, showed a completely different pattern. Their well-being climbed with income too, right up until about $100,000 a year, and then it flattened hard. Past that line, extra income did almost nothing to lift them out of where they were. That $100,000 figure is not a coincidence. It is the original $75,000 from 2010, carried forward and adjusted for inflation. The line never actually disappeared. It had just been hiding inside a smaller, sadder group. The first study could not pull apart from everyone else. The researchers were honest about what that flat line probably means. For that unhappy minority, the things weighing on them, grief, loneliness, clinical depression, simply are not things a bigger paycheck can reach. As Killingsworth put it, if you are rich and miserable, more money will not fix it. So, what does $100,000 actually mean for the person watching this? According to the most recent census figures, the median household income in the United States sits at just under $84,000. That is the exact middle of the entire country. Half of all households earn less than that. Even households led by someone with a bachelor's degree land at a median of about $133,000, which sounds like plenty until you notice it is barely past the line where the plateau is even said to begin. For a huge share of the people watching this video, you are nowhere near the ceiling. You are still on the steep part of the curve, the part where more money genuinely does buy more good days and less fear. The plateau most people worry about is closer to a wealthy person's problem, and most households have not actually gotten there yet. There is another layer here, from a completely separate study out of Purdue University, led by researcher Andrew Jebb, using Gallup World Poll data covering more than 1,700,000 people across 164 countries. They found that the income where happiness stops climbing is not one universal number stamped on all of humanity. It moves depending on where you happen to live. Globally, for that big picture life evaluation, the average landed around $95,000, with day-to-day emotional well-being settling out lower, somewhere between $60,000 and $75,000. But in wealthier regions, the number ran higher. In North America, it climbed to about $105,000. In Australia and New Zealand, it reached $125,000. In Latin America and the Caribbean, it sat far lower, around $35,000. The richer the country around you, the more it seemed to take before people felt they finally had enough, which tells you something a little uncomfortable. A lot of what you think you need is not set by you at all. It is set by the people standing next to you. And in several wealthier regions, including North America, the researchers found something sharper still. Once people pushed well past that threshold, their life satisfaction did not just flatten out, it slightly dropped. So why does more money, past a certain point, stop paying you back, or start quietly taxing you instead? Three forces work against every raise you ever earn, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. The first is something psychologists call hedonic adaptation. You get the raise, the nicer apartment, the better car, and for a few weeks it feels genuinely incredible. Then your brain does what brains are built to do. It resets. The new thing becomes the normal thing, and you are standing right back where you started emotionally, now needing even more to feel that same lift again. Think about Tessa. She pushed her salary from $70,000 up to $140,000 over a few years, moved somewhere nicer, upgraded her car. And if you ask her honestly, the raise she was certain would fix things did not. The grief she was carrying and the relationships fraying at the edges never moved when the money did. The second force is comparison, and it is brutal. At $40,000 a year, a coworker's new car barely registers. Climb to $200,000, move into the neighborhood that comes with it, and suddenly you are surrounded by people with lake houses and boats, and you feel like you are falling behind, even while out-earning most of the country. The finish line runs away from you at exactly the speed you chase it. The third force is time, and almost nobody warns you about it ahead of time. The income that carries you past the plateau usually does not show up for free. It arrives strapped to longer hours, heavier responsibility, and a phone that never really goes quiet. Compare Miles and Corey. Miles was scraping by at $38,000 a year, one surprise bill away from disaster. When his income climbed to $90,000, his whole life steadied underneath him. He slept better, he stopped flinching at the mailbox. Corey, on the other end, was already sitting comfortably at $260,000. He noticed his last raise for maybe a month before it faded straight into the background, because what was actually weighing on him, the hours, the growing distance from his family, had nothing to do with the size of his paycheck. Same species of raise, completely different medicine. So is money the villain in all of this? No. Money is one of the most useful tools a person can have, and pretending otherwise is a lie usually told by people who already have plenty of it. The trap is not money itself. It is the quiet belief that more of it is automatically the answer to how you feel. That belief is what keeps people trading away the things that actually move the needle: their time, their health, their relationships, in exchange for a number that stopped buying them anything a long time ago. What the research keeps circling back to is that the real thing money buys, underneath all the stuff, is control. Control over your time, control over your choices, the ability to walk away from a bad situation without panic, to say no. Think about what it actually means to have 6 months of expenses saved in the bank. That cushion does not change your job title, but it completely changes the sentence you are able to say to a bad boss, which is that you can afford to leave. When more income buys you more of that control, your happiness rises, and it can keep rising for a long time. When more income costs you that control instead, you have crossed a line, no matter what the number on the check says. Here is the honest takeaway. The exact point where more money stops making you happier was never a single number painted on a wall somewhere. It is the moment your money has already bought your peace, and everything after that is decoration you are trading pieces of your life to afford. For most people watching this, that moment sits higher than you fear and further off than you think, which means the climb is far from over. For a smaller group, it arrives around $100,000 and simply refuses to move, because whatever is hurting them was never something a paycheck could reach in the first place. So tell me honestly, where do you think your own line sits? Have you ever hit a number you were sure would fix everything, and felt that strange quiet letdown when it barely changed anything at all? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if this shifted how you think about your own paycheck, the next thing worth understanding is the exact order your money should move in, so every dollar past your basics works as hard as it possibly can. That is the next video, so subscribe if you don't want to miss